Qatar has confirmed Hamas and Israel have agreed on a temporary truce in the besieged territory. This development comes after weeks of negotiations mediated by Qatar alongside the US and Egypt. The Israeli government approved the deal after a lengthy cabinet meeting and despite divisions among ministers. The pause is expected to start on Thursday morning. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the agreement does not mean the war will stop. And a statement released by the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the social media platform X says the state of Qatar announces the success of its joint mediation efforts undertaken with Egypt and the United States between Israel and Hamas, resulting in an agreement for a humanitarian pause. The starting time of the pause will be announced within the next 24 hours and last for 4 days, subject to extension. Well, here's what we do know about the deal. It involves the release of 50 Israeli women and child captives in exchange for a temporary 4-day ceasefire. Also in the agreement, we believe about 150 Palestinian women and children will be released from Israeli jails. Well, during the temporary ceasefire, Israeli media say Palestinians who fled to southern Gaza will not be allowed to return to their homes in the north. And the most depressing part of all, Israel says it will resume its bombardment as soon as the temporary truce is over.
Marwan, what do you make of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the other men that we were hearing from, the Defence Minister, Minister Benny Gantz, all saying that the ceasefire could continue, they would like the ceasefire to continue, but so must the war?
Yeah, absolutely, because, you know, as we've been saying earlier, you put a pause to a video game, you don't put a pause to a genocide. And clearly they are genocidal in their war. So they have kept on saying again and again and again, especially Minister of Defense Gallant, that don't ever get the impression that we're going to stop, we're just going to continue with the war. As soon as this is over, we will continue, we know our objectives and so on and so forth. But back to what they were saying, and I thought the spin was considerable this time. I mean, there was so much spin, I could go and dissect every sentence said the past 45 minutes to tell you where the spin is. And a lot of it was not just, you know, sort of playing with the truth. A lot of it was just not factual. And I think the most important part was not factual. They've been trying to make the argument throughout this press conference that they had to go through a month and a half of war, risking the lives of their own captives, right? But it was all justified because they couldn't have reached this deal before.
Yeah.
Not true. This is not true. We know, all of us, because we've heard it repeated again and again by Hamas leaders, that they were ready from day one,
yeah,
to release the old women and the children and so on and so forth that they have held.
Mohammed Al-Masri is with the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. We've just been hearing from the Israeli government. The latest is that the release of captives is not going to happen before Friday. We had been hearing throughout the day on Wednesday that this could happen on Thursday morning. And it just reminds us that this is such an it's a movable, it's a fragile situation. Anything can change at any minute. I know that you were listening to the news conference from the Israeli War Cabinet. What did you make of what you heard from the three men?
Well, first of all, there was something that was striking, and Marwan spoke to it a few minutes ago, and that is that Netanyahu tried to claim that the only reason that he was able to achieve this victory, the only reason he was able to get these hostages back is because he's had the proverbial knife to Hamas's neck, right? That he's been, overwhelming them with military force. This is simply not the case. The reality is that Hamas, from day one, actually wanted to give these civilian, the elderly people and the children back to Israel, and Israel was refusing these offers. So it's actually Israel that's been forced kind of to take this deal. That's the first thing. The second thing, now, in terms of their end game here, it was also striking to hear all three men talk about the need to continue this war.
Yeah.
Right, which is, as many people have noted, is kind of an unwinnable, war, right? Because Hamas is more of an idea than it is anything else. But even if we take them at their word that they're trying to eliminate Hamas, what we see is that the end game here is about greater Israel, right? This is something that is deeply embedded within Zionist ideology. It's been written about by many Israeli scholars. The idea is that what happened in the catastrophe, the Nakba in 1948, and then subsequently with occupations of Palestinian land was just the beginning, and that ultimately the land needs to be purified of Arabs or from Arabs, and that it needs to be purely Jewish from the river to the sea. That is the dominant ideology inside of Israel. That's the dominant Zionist thought on all of this. And what we're seeing take place in Gaza is an attempt to implement sort of another phase of that. They want to get all the Palestinians out of Gaza, and sadly, they're succeeding on some fronts.
And they've said that the Palestinians who have fled the fighting in the north and gone to South Gaza, that they will not allow them to return to the north. There are something like 1.5 million people in Gaza who are internally displaced. I mean, what happens to these people?
Yeah. Right. So first of all, we have to point out that this kind of forced displacement is a war crime under international law. This has been pointed out by numerous international humanitarian law scholars. So there are already numerous war crimes being carried out. But as you noted, they're destroying the north of Gaza. They're trying to get everybody out of the north of Gaza.
They're also destroying much of the south.
Well, right. They've taken people to the south. And I think the goal now is to make life so miserable and make the conditions so bad that people have no choice but ultimately to leave Gaza altogether.
But where do they go?
Well, the Israeli government has been very open. They've been saying things like, why don't the Egyptians take the Gazans in? Why don't the Jordanians take the Gazans in? The Israeli government has been very transparent about what it wants to do, and this is one of the reasons why Palestinians, many of them, are so adamant about staying put. They're saying they don't want to go to Egypt, they don't want to go to Jordan or anywhere else.
And the U.S. has, many people have said that the U.S. has not used the leverage that it has with Israel. But one thing that the U.S. has been quite outspoken about is whenever Prime Minister Netanyahu has spoken about the plans for Gaza, whenever the fighting ends, the U.S. has said that there cannot be a forced displacement of people in Gaza. There cannot be Israeli control over Gaza.
In many ways, this is rhetoric that the Biden administration has to maintain. They can't come out and say they're aiding and abetting, war crimes and likely genocide. But the bottom line is that the Israeli lobby in the United States exerts considerable sway. All of these mainstream politicians in both the Democratic and Republican parties receive many millions of dollars from the Israel lobby. So there has to be a certain level of support for Israel, for American politics to function. That's just the unfortunate reality, and that's why the United States is effectively in cahoots with Israel and facilitating and aiding and abetting everything that they're doing in Gaza right now.
Mr. Masri, thank you very much for your analysis. We do appreciate it. That is Mohammed Al-Masri from the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies.